Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. We are here on site in beautiful Bartonville, Texas, where we are revisiting, coming back for a second time with our guest, luxury home builder, Adam Lingenfelter. Adam was our guest on episode 79, which was released in July of 2019. It is not necessary for you to listen to that in order to enjoy this episode. However, I did listen to it. A lot of it holds up. And after you enjoy this conversation with Adam, feel free to go back and listen to episode 79. The surprising thing that salespeople who lose out on business, what they don't do that they should do every single time. And you will discover how Adam and his purchasing team thinks about interacting with suppliers and subcontractors now that the power has shifted away from sellers back to builders. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Adam Lingenfelter. As always, thank you for listening. So way back in episode 79, we had met. I think we probably recorded that in June of 2019. So all of a sudden, a lot of things have changed, but I listened to it. A lot of it holds up really well. But for audience members who do not know your background, I'm going to take them in the way back machine. I want you to take me back. You're 12 years old, maybe sixth grade, more or less. If you can, for me and the audience, place me where you were geographically, maybe a little bit of context about your family life, and what were you passionate about then?
Okay. I was in Washington State at the time. We had a really good family, really small town, not in the big city anywhere. Very, very rural, very down to earth, a lot of farmers, that type of area. Passionate. I mean, my grandparents had a vacation home that was on the Puget Sound. And so I was super passionate about fishing and clamming, and anything related to being at the bay was really, really fun for me. I would say that in sports, loved football, loved baseball, and that type of stuff. I kind of stumbled into building materials by accident. And I would say that probably most people do.
Most of us have, right?
Yeah. That wasn't my plan, but I was outside sales, spent a lot of time with contractors in the field and all that. And for me, it was really, there was just a passion there to learn more than what I was doing. I didn't dislike selling, but I didn't feel good about it if I didn't understand how what I did affected everybody else, right? To me, I had to feel like I was part of the big picture, not just my little section of it. So I spent a lot of time talking to plumbers, electricians, HVAC guys, anybody really that was around when I'm out there to the job sites that was willing to talk to me. I just would ask them, why do you do what you do? Mm-hmm. Tell me what you love about it. Tell me what you don't like about it. What are your frustrations, whatever. And ask as many questions as possible just so I could get a little bit better at what I did. In doing that, I felt really comfortable when I went to go build my first house of doing it myself. Because I felt like I had talked to these guys and had become really good friends with them. And then if I ever went to do it, they would all help me through that. And they did. I mean, my first house, I knew very, very little about building. And that was back in 93. But my group of friends that were subs, they made it really, really super easy.
How old were you when you embarked on your first home? My presumption is it was your home.
It was in 93. It was my own home. And I would have been 22.
Oh, wow. What did you learn from that build about being a builder? It's one thing to be a salesperson and being outgoing and curious and persistent and someone who was probably already thinking like a craftsman. Imagine it's another thing entirely to become your own GC on your own house. Were there any sort of insights or things that you remember that you picked up at that point that you still think about now, or you realize that is a truism that I learned on that first build when I was 22 years old?
Yeah, I would say there's at least a few of those. The first one would be dealing with municipalities was kind of a challenge. Really a challenge when you don't have a clue what you're doing. And so thankfully, again, I had some really good builder friends that walked me through the permitting process, and then just meeting with their project managers on site, saying, hey, what do I need to expect going through inspections and that kind of stuff. Were super helpful. And really getting to know the inspectors, because if they're on your side, they will help you through things. And I don't mean they're going to let you get away with stuff. I mean, they're going to say, hey, when I come inspect, I'm going to really be looking at this, this, and this. Yeah. Make sure that sub takes care of that for me or whatever, that type of stuff. Being friends with them, they will really help you be successful, and you're not missing days, re-inspecting, that type of deal. If you just treat them really, really well, a lot of times that's all it takes.
Probably it's the classic story we all have, which is, who are you? Where are you from? What do you want? And trying to think these guys, hey, this is just another customer. This is a new friend that I just haven't made yet. Probably makes a big difference. So you are progressing in your career. When did you realize, okay, this habit of asking questions, getting to know people, understanding the whole build process enables you to hit your sales goals and be really successful in sales, even when you probably felt like, I'm not really selling. Like, I can't imagine you on a hard sale. It just doesn't compute.
No, I was definitely a relationship salesperson for sure. And my clients got me lots of other clients because I would ask, do you know anybody else looking for, lumber salesman at the time? And I would get lots of help from other builder friends. So it just was, again, I cared about them. I cared about their business. I cared about doing a really good job with it. And that's all it really took for them to really want to help me out. Some of them I have a couple builder friends that became very, very close. One was in my wedding, and it's because they knew how much I cared about their business. And eventually it led to a really good friendship.
Is that something you can coach or train once people are already working for Lingenfelter Homes? We met Taylor before, who seemed wonderful, seemed like a really good egg. To what degree are you able to find young talent and say, hey, I can teach you over time and develop you into someone who ultimately is going to be responsible for, the build is one side. I can only imagine meeting and exceeding expectations of engineers and whoever else has all these different consultants who are helping them build a home like this. What's your flexibility on that? Or do you just have to find people and invest more money in a salary because they are more seasoned?
Taylor, he was a school teacher, went and worked for a production builder for a few years, met him, really liked his personality, really liked, super intelligent guy, but also you could tell he's a caring guy. We knew we could train him. We knew that we can get him to this level. And so the learning curve was much shorter because he knew how to build a house. He just didn't know how to build the things that we're building today.
Right. As you think about in your leadership role running the organization, Taylor at the project manager level, what has changed the most since, we'll call it post-pandemic, but say starting in 2023 and over the last, say, 18 months, what's changed the most that has either made your business either easier or harder, or maybe neither, just different?
Yeah, our business has changed a lot since that pandemic, time frame. Everybody got really, really busy as builders. We all did. And if you weren't busy, there was probably something really wrong with you. And unfortunately, what happened is all of us were doing too much, more than we can handle. And lots of mistakes were being made. Pricing went through the roof with subs and vendors and everything else. So jobs became unprofitable. And it was an extremely difficult time. For us, it was great, though. It's absolutely transformed our business. It made us get a lot better at what we did because we got, I guess, a little bit complacent in how we operate because things were easy for a while. And you were able to get away with not planning maybe in as far as advanced that we probably should have been doing even back then. And so we are now planning significantly in advance on everything. Back then you could order windows, let's say, around the time the foundation is poured, and you'd have windows. We're ordering windows 8 weeks before foundation is poured. That's just one example. At one time, we had 22 to 24 week lead times on windows. So you just had to learn how to do it a little bit differently. Masonry was another one where, you get into almost 30 weeks on some masonry products that you'd have to wait for it. So you had to be thinking so far in advance to make sure that you would have it in time. Still to this day, certain appliances are a year to get them. So you just really have to be a lot better at it. And so that was one of the reasons we added an interior design staff, was to control a lot more of it and to do it a lot earlier. When we were working with interior designers outside of the company, they didn't really think about or and I'm not knocking them, but they didn't really care the challenges we would have with getting the products they were selecting, right? And in order to keep our customers satisfied and to make sure the projects are moving at a good pace, we had to take control of that and start doing a lot of the selections and that type of stuff ourselves, so we know we could do it early enough, and we would be picking items we knew that were available to us, because reselecting is a very costly thing, and that happened a ton during that pandemic timeframe.
How challenging was it, both internally with your team and then externally communicating it to the homeowners, that these expectations have changed for all of us given this new reality?
We spend a significant amount of time before we contract with a customer. I mean, I think a lot of luxury builders do, but I know that we have changed that significantly. We probably have 8 to 15 meetings before we even contract with somebody over discussing scope, selections, processes, getting to know them and what their goals are, really trying to understand the property they're building on and what are the things they love about that property. Really from start to finish, we really want to kind of build that house out in our minds and on paper before we even start it. So we do spend a lot of time, and in those meetings we talk a lot about challenges that have happened, challenges that could happen, things that they need to prepare for, how they can help us avoid those challenges by selecting early, selecting certain types of products, that type of stuff. So we do everything in our power to communicate to the point where we feel we will probably eliminate 99% of those challenges, but there's still some that come up that are absolutely unpredictable.
And for those 8 to 15 hours before you have them sign an agreement and it's like, okay, we're going to partner on this, is that mainly your time? Are you shielding the time and protecting that for someone like Taylor, who, if this does work out, he's going to be the project manager? Maybe just give me a little context about that.
Yeah, I would say that I'm probably in the majority of those meetings by myself.
Okay.
But we bring the team in for the last few meetings.
Okay.
And we're really, at that point, I mean, I'll kind of walk you through a normal process. Would be a client would reach out to us and say, hey, we want to talk to you about building a house. I would sit down with them. I'd try to find out what their budget looks like. A lot of customers are afraid to give you a budget because they feel like you're just going to charge them whatever they say, But it's really important for us because we could build homes that are in the high 200s per foot, over 1,000 per foot, right? Depending on what the client wants. So I really need to understand first what they want to spend. And then once I know what they want to spend, we can start talking through the details and I can understand whether it's achievable or not. I'll typically walk through roughly, 30 different allowance items that they could potentially do, whether it be cabinets, countertops, tile, hardwood floorings, whatever, and understand, do they want specialty things? Do they want a sauna? Do they want a storm shelter? Do they want an elevator in the home? There's so many different things that you could put into a house, and I need to know which one of those are going to go in there for me to be able to budget for that, to even give them a rough idea or range of what that house will look like. But once I have a good feeling for that, I'll create an initial budget based on the square footage they say they want to have, how many car garage, let's say, how big an outdoor space, do they want pool and fencing and all that kind of stuff in the budget as well. Once I have that, then I'll give them a budget range kind of based on the low end of what I think they're telling me and the high end of what I think they're telling me. And it may be a couple $100,000 difference on a $3 million build, right? Between that. But at least at that point I can say, look, does this range work for you? And if it does, then we'll start going into design. And then through the design process, we'll go through that a few more times where, they get the basically the floor plan done, I'll reprice it. They go through and get the elevation done, I'll reprice it, because those things will change the cost depending on the design of the home, right? And then I'll do one final budget, but at the end of it, they know pretty closely where the budget's going to be, and there's no surprises with that. Once we get to that point, then my team comes and gets involved, and then we really sit down before we contract and have a few meetings to really dial in those selections so that we, instead of that $200,000 spread, we get it down to as close as we possibly can, so that when we contract, the customer is really, really comfortable with where we're going.
How you phrase that question, because I think this is a somewhat unique situation on the price tag of a home that is going to be in the multi-millions of dollars. At the same time, this is a very general problem, which is somebody reaches out and says, hey, we think we want some consulting. I'm like, all right. And I always ask, I normally don't get an answer, but there are times where I'm questioning, am I even asking this in the most intelligent way? How do you ask the customer in a way that gets a response that makes them feel safe, that if they say 5.9 million, you're not going to come back with 5.89 million and say, oh, it just worked out. How do you, what phrase do you use to ask that question?
So I just take a little more time explaining it.
Okay.
And so I just let them know that, again, the range could be significant between them doing very basic stuff to doing top of the line. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to go in like a lot of builders do, will just price it based on what they think they may want. And then when the client is building, you hear tons of stories where it's change order, change order, change order, change order. We want to avoid that as much as possible by getting everything solved before we even start the house, before we even contract it. So I'm like, I'm doing this for you. You're ultimately the one that's going to decide how much you're going to spend. And the sooner you give me the accurate information on that and what you really want to spend, the quicker we'll get to your goal, you know?
Well, I'll tee this up for you. I've had a few unusual conversations with builders that I have known that have reached out. And the general tenor is their pipeline, their business development process to get new customers ready, they've realized over the last 12 months has went from, we always had a really strong pipeline coming post-COVID, and now that has changed, and they are just questioning how to start it just to get them started. And two of them, conversations the last 2 weeks, largely said the same thing. They're starting just to price out segments of the build. Let's just get the foundation. Let me tell you what it is. Let's get it started, and then we'll deal with the rest later. You can imagine where this is going. This has proven to be a disastrous idea for folks that would say, well, hey, you must have a good backlog. Adam, congrats to you. I don't. Money's tight. Things are changing in my market. I got to get these folks started because I need some cash flow. What you're talking about seems exhaustive, and I don't really have 8 to 15 meetings to have until we know that we actually have a partner here, someone we can build their home. What sort of advice might you give these builders?
I would say if you're really trying to get cash flow, you need to work on some quick remodels, things like that, just to get something. I mean, you can do a bathroom remodel, you could do, add a garage onto a house, whatever, and significantly less time and significantly less planning than you need to do for a full build. And there's a lot of builders right now that they're living on that. They're really spending all their time doing that. And some of them really high-end, remodels, but there are a lot of people that don't want to leave their house right now because the interest rates are so low on their house. Right. And so they're remodeling. It's a great opportunity for builders that don't have that pipeline to be able to go in and get some business and cash flow quickly.
Okay, that's good. So we've shared this. We have exactly one short video on our Instagram feed going back several years, despite my greatest efforts to try to put things out that will help a large number of people. I think we have maybe helped a small number of people. There's one video, if you looked at the performance of all the videos we've ever done, there's 1,000 that are near a couple hundred, and there's one that is approaching 500,000 views on Instagram. You know which one that is, Adam. It was the one where you joined us at our sales fundamentals workshop, and there wasn't a whole lot of context. We did take it out of context a little bit. You were talking about, I'll just say, these are my words, not yours, used and abused trends, farmhouse look, shiplap, the Joanna Gaines style. To this day, we have people on both sides who are giving feedback. And what you were sharing was largely, hey, sometimes you have to coach your customers, your homeowners, out of certain styles that are no longer in because it's not in their best interest. There's many people who say, listen, your job is to just shut your mouth and build whatever the hell they want. There's lots of those comments. You shouldn't read them. How do you think about your role guiding homeowners to something that they say, hopefully, I want to live in here the rest of my life, and I want it to be timeless, and I want to be happy when I move in and 5 years from them? How do you think about that?
Yeah, and again, that is just really getting to know them. It's spending a lot of time early on to become I don't want to say necessarily friends, but a lot of times you do become friends, spending a lot of time with them. Going through the design and build process, it may be 2 years you're working with the same client, and you will get to know them really well and what their goals and desires are. If somebody comes to us with a trend that we know is really falling off the face of the earth, and it's going to be 2-3 years from now, nobody's going to be doing it, and they're dating their project, we're just going to be honest with them and just let them know that, hey, we'll do what you want to do because ultimately you are the client. But I want to tell you right now what things are popular, which things aren't popular, and what potentially could be dated really quickly. Sometimes those conversations go well. I would say most of the time they go well. Every once in a while somebody will really, push back on it, but it's rare. I mean, I would say very few, because again, they're trying to get, in their mind, the perfect home. They want to listen to advice. When I go somewhere, and I just bought a mattress last week. When I went there, I didn't tell the mattress guy what to do, right? Right. I went to him and said, you need to advise me because I know very little about mattresses. You help me get the mattress. This is what I want. Here's my goals. Now you point me in the right direction. The customers that don't listen to their builders, they're not going to ultimately get what they want in the end. They're going to get what they think they want, but they may not actually know until they go through that process.
What's changed over the last couple of years with your relationship with suppliers? Do you have any instances, I don't want to know names or companies, where you'd say, actually, going into COVID, they were one of our strongest relationships, but because of what happened over that, 18, 24 months, we don't really work with them anymore, or vice versa, or any sort of context here for our supply side that's listening, thinking about, and what they're thinking is, man, prices have come way down, and they are feeling that power, that leverage, which pre-COVID was pretty much exclusively with the builder and the developer, swing wildly to the sell side, and now it's come back. Any messages or any sort of stories or anecdotes, general, specific, that you would share on that?
Yeah, I'll give you two. One is on the supply side and one of them is on the subcontractor side. So we had a vendor that we were very loyal with and really used them on, I would say, 95% of our projects for the first 5 years we were in business. When we went through that COVID period and things got challenging to get, they started pooling all the resources to production builders, because production builders got to the point where they told them, look, we'll pay whatever we need to pay. We need product, right? Because they were selling the houses so quickly, they had to keep building them. So a lot of the suppliers especially moved all their resources to that production builder, and the custom builder kind of, beyond secondary, it was really barely, the relationships were barely there anymore. And so we ended up leaving, and in this one case, it was a very large national supplier, and we went to a much smaller local supplier, and we're still operating with them today. They took really good care of us in that switch and continue to take really good care of us. That big national supplier is coming back and wanting our business again, but we're not going to make that change because we may go through this again in a couple of years. It's hard to say, but right now we're enjoying that local relationship. On the subcontractor side, I would say what happened with that is a lot of them got, I don't want to say greedy, but kind of greedy. I think we all did at some level, but took on way more than they could and just really didn't perform very well. And it cost us a lot of money fixing things that they did wrong. We had to go back and redo. We really got deliberate on the type of subcontractor we use. So much smaller companies that don't have the goal to become big companies that are very happy with doing, let's say 50 homes or 75 homes a year or whatever total. Those are the kind of, subcontractors we want to work with because they can manage their staff very closely. They can stay very consistent with their staffing. We have a lot less issues. If we go through those, ramp ups, they're just going to not take on new business. They're going to say, sorry, this is all I could handle. And we're having much, much better luck with that type of client or subcontractor because it's very consistent, and consistency is very important in our business.
How do you think about the total cost when looking at your builds and knowing you would fall into the category, correct me if I'm wrong, price, sure, is always important. We're looking for quality. We're looking for consistency. We're looking for effective communication. you're going to bundle all that up and at some point make your determination like, okay, this is within the realm of what we will pay a premium for. How do you think about that when you are going for smaller subs, knowing that, hey, if you did want to shave a few dollars off, you could probably find somebody cheaper? How do you work through that calculus between kind of the old speed, quality, and price? You get to pick two.
It's funny you said that. I was literally going to say that same thing. Something I learned really early. I would say that price is definitely not one of our main factors. However, we usually have 2 to 3 subcontractors per product category, and we do get pricing from at least a couple, if not 3, on every project, just to make sure that somebody doesn't see something wrong. Every once in a while, a very good sub may look at the plans and see something that isn't there, and their pricing is significantly higher than the other 2 that come in. It's like, why is yours so much higher? And then we can identify, oh, no, that's not really happening. You saw something that isn't there. If they all come in really close, we know obviously that pricing is where it needs to be. I would say we are very consistent with our subs. We stay with the same subgroup for a really long period of time. It takes, obviously they have to perform, but it would take a lot. We're not going to just leave because another sub comes in a little bit cheaper, because we've tried that in the past and it rarely works well.
What would you tell a salesperson who says, you know what, I fall into this category with a Lingenfelter Homes or someone like that in my local market. I am one of 3 or one of 4 who bids on this product category, and I've submitted pricing, try to be really detailed, try to bring some innovative ideas, give you other options. I haven't won one of the last 6 jobs. How might they consider approaching you if you were saying, oh no, this is one of the guys that's kind of in our product category, but they haven't won anything recently? How might you advise them to approach that?
I'd say with honesty, they should just ask. You'd be surprised how few actually blast that question. They'll price and price and price and not get anything. And our purchasing people are really willing to share and explain why, but they don't ask. They don't say, why am I not getting the business? Is my pricing out of whack? Is it because, you're afraid of our quality or our service, or what are the reasons behind you not choosing us? Because we feel really good about the product and our service and all that, but you haven't made a switch or at least given a shot on it. So we want to know. They'll share. They're good about being open and honest and letting them know. Again, these are people just trying to work like we all do, right? They're trying to be successful. They'll give them that information, but they got to ask.
I'm not asking you to read this fictional person's mind that I proposed to you. If you had to hazard to guess, why do you think that is? Because that, to me, on both sides, if I'm going to lose business, hey, that's going to happen. I'll call and say, hey, just curious, anything we can learn. On the other side, I know this from a firsthand, as a purchasing manager, I tried to call every sub or partner that didn't win the business, and I'll say, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I want you to hear it from me. I routinely was told, this is a stunning turn of events. we never hear from purchasing when they proactively call us right when that decision is made, which I think definitely helped me on this other side where I'm losing business. But why do you think that might be? Why wouldn't people call, given all the work that goes into a build, especially like on a build like this?
Say some of it probably is inexperience.
Okay.
Maybe they just don't understand how simple of a thing it is. Maybe they don't want to offend the purchasing person, whatever. So I'd say that's part of it, but I would say a lot of it's just laziness.
Okay.
And that's kind of harsh, but the reality is, man, that's part of your job. If you're a salesperson, you should be asking that question. If you're not asking that question, you are wasting a lot of people's time. And that's the problem, is a lot of the salespeople aren't doing all the work, right? They've got people in their office, estimators, interior salespeople that are doing all the work and basically giving the finished product to the outside salesperson, and they just email it. And they're not asking the right questions. They're probably not asking the right questions at the beginning as well. They're probably providing pricing that doesn't make sense. It isn't complete. It isn't what the purchasing person asked for because they didn't ask enough questions. And if they're not asking them at the end, they probably didn't ask them at the beginning. And that's probably a big part of why they're not getting the project.
You're probably certainly right. I often wonder though, like, you lose business, like, do you just not want to know? Are you afraid of what you might hear on why you're losing business? That might explain why you lost this one and others, but I'm sure there's a whole host of crazy human nature, reasons why people don't. But I do realize you have a job. You're a busy man. You've been very generous with your time and given us a tour of this build, which is fantastic. What question have I not asked? I'm going to outsource my responsibility as a lazy podcast host to the guest. What question haven't I asked you that you think either A, you should have asked me this, or B, I wish you did?
Well, knowing your audience, I would just say that we're still dealing with, especially now, I would say as we went through COVID, everybody disappeared. Subs and vendors disappeared. Like, we had nobody contacting us. It got really, really quiet, and we were having to chase them down like crazy. They were all so busy that they really couldn't really fulfill all the orders that they had. Mm-hmm. They weren't going to chase down potentially more work.
Right.
So we didn't hear from them at all. It's very active again. Back to podcast 79. Mm-hmm. We're back to that again, where I'm getting probably 1,000 contacts a week. And I'm not the purchasing person, so it's the wrong person that they're trying to contact. Again, I would just say that to that person out there that's trying to get our business or trying to get other builders' business, they just got to take the time. They got to get to know the company that they're trying to sell. They got to spend time in the field. They got to meet the project managers or superintendents. They got to ask questions. Do you like your current suppliers or your current subcontractor? What things do you like especially about them? What things do you wish were a little bit different? Get to know them on a much greater level so that when you do finally approach that purchasing person or whatever, you really know the business and you're able to offer up some meaningful things you could do to help their business. Because if you're just sending an email or a text or leaving a voicemail, which is what happens to me 99.9% of the time, right, that just says, hey, would love to bid your work, I don't have time for that. And most people don't have time to reach out. If we did that, I would literally need at least 2 full-time people just to respond to people to get bids. Somebody needs to care enough about our business to really make the effort to try to sell us so that we'll want to buy from them.
Yeah, that's my takeaway, which on one level we all know. What I hear you saying is relationships matter. And the way to prove that with homeowners, with subcontractors, is to spend time with them, a large amount of time with them, knowing that you are not getting paid for that yet. But it's a relationship and things work out well, whether it's a 2 or 3 year, full design, build, or hoping you find a subcontractor that is one of your main guys for the next 10 years. It's just front loading that time in your schedule, saying this will pay off in spades later. That's the thing that, again, on one level, we all know that relationships are important, but I think you've said it in a couple different ways. This is how you do it, and how you've been successful doing it.
And I would just add to that is caring for them really matters as well, right? If it's one thing to spend the time with them, but if you're sincere in why you're spending the time, that you really do care for them personally, you care for their business, their success, it doesn't take long for somebody to feel if that's genuine or if it's just a sales pitch or whatever. But in doing that, whether it be, again, a subcontractor to us, a vendor to us to our clients, us to our subs and vendors, if we show that we care, the relationship, they become really strong. And we've got subs and vendors we've been dealing with since we started our very first house till now, just because we do care about them. We're friends with them. Yeah. I've gone to some of their daughters' weddings or sons' weddings or, whatever, because we've gotten to know them and they care about us and we care about them.
I care about our relationship. I appreciate you. Thank you for making time. And we brought our team in. We got a tour from Taylor, so we'll make sure to thank him as well. But thank you. This is very generous. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Adam Lingenfelter, and we got some bite-sized nuggets from our tour with Mr. Taylor Parker, who's the project manager on this build. If you did get value from this episode, please rate and review this on whatever podcast player or YouTube. If you are only listening to this, we have video of my entire conversation with Adam. And keep in mind, people in your network, look to people like you to find out where they should put their limited time and attention. If you would share that with them, we would greatly appreciate it as we strive to bring the entire construction community closer together to build more productively, safer, and profitably. As always, thank you for listening.